The Baltic skies were clear, until a shadow tore across the horizon at precisely 4:12 a.m. U.S. radar stations aboard the destroyer USS Ross detected an unidentified drone racing at nearly 600 miles per hour, closing the gap toward an F-35 Lightning II patrolling just 12 nautical miles east of Bornholm Island. For a moment, the jet's pilot believed it was a routine probe. But then, without warning, the Russian drone ignited a final burst of speed, its nose angled like a spear, slamming directly into the F-35's wingtip. The shockwave rattled the cockpit, alarms screamed, and in an instant, the world's most advanced stealth fighter was spiraling. This was not an accident. It was a calculated move, an unthinkable decision that threatened to ignite a chain reaction across NATO's northern frontier. What changed in that instant to alter the balance of power? If clear-eyed analysis matters to you, hit like, subscribe, and comment. Your voice fuels our mission. The F-35 leveled out, its pilot fighting the controls as sparks trailed from the shattered wing. For a few tense seconds, it seemed the fighter could recover. Yet the Baltic Sea was alive with signals, multiple drones now circling, their transponders silent, their movements unnervingly deliberate. Russian warships, stationed just beyond international waters, adjusted their bearings. Their radar arrays tilted like watchful eyes, locking onto every NATO aircraft in the sector. What appeared to be an isolated clash now felt like the opening move of a much larger game. Could this reckless strike have been a signal bait designed to lure the U.S. Navy into a miscalculated response? Or was it a mistake destined to spiral beyond control? Could this be an irreversible mistake? 4:12 a.m. The collision was more than a mechanical accident. It was a message. The F-35 Lightning II spiraled in the night sky, stabilizers rattling as the pilot fought to keep control. Warning sirens shrieked inside the cockpit, while on the flight deck of the USS Ross, sailors froze at the sudden feed from the jet's camera, sparks trailing from the shattered wingtip, fire flickering against the Baltic clouds. Within seconds, encrypted transmissions raced across NATO's northern command. Every vessel, every radar post in Denmark, Poland, and Germany received the same alert. Russian drone impact confirmed. 4:18 a.m. At first, the sea seemed calm. The only sounds were the distant hum of turbines and the low, steady waves breaking against steel hulls. But then, the Ross's SPY-1 radar lit up with a spray of dots, small, fast, and closing. 10, then 20, then 30 drones, flying just 30 feet above the surface to hide beneath radar coverage. Their speeds varied between 300 and 600 miles per hour. This was no surveillance flight. These were suicide drones, optimized for collision, each carrying a warhead large enough to puncture the hull of a destroyer or rupture the engine of a jet. The captain of the Ross, Commander James Callahan, gripped the edge of the command console. He knew the protocols. U.S. Navy rules of engagement demanded restraint unless hostile intent was undeniable. Yet here it was hostile intent screaming across the radar. But to fire first would be to hand Moscow the narrative that America had escalated. 4:24 a.m. The swarm approached in a tight formation. Above, a second F-35 patrolled in wide arcs, its APG-81 radar scanning through the dark like an invisible searchlight. The pilot's voice crackled into the Ross's command center. "These drones are loaded. I confirm visual on hardpoint, small but lethal." That confirmation changed everything. This was not provocation for provocation's sake. It was an engineered test, a demonstration meant for the world to watch. And still, the order from Brussels was chillingly clear. Engage only in self-defense. Document every movement. Do not be the first to strike. 4:28 a.m. The crew's eyes fixed on the range counter. 15 nautical miles. Only minutes remained. Aegis combat system consoles glowed red, waiting for input. Dozens of missiles sat in vertical launch cells. Silent titans beneath the deck. SM-2 second for medium-range intercepts. SM-6 second for faster, longer-reach engagements. To unleash them would turn the calm sea into a wall of fire. To wait too long might mean watching steel and lives torn apart. The sailors whispered among themselves, Was this Russia's hidden strategy? To push the United States and NATO to the edge of hesitation, to study where the line of engagement truly lay? A bluff could reveal NATO's rules of war without ever firing a shot. A real strike could spark the largest naval escalation in the Baltic since the Cold War. 4:31 a.m. Then the twist came. From the north, another radar contact emerged, a Russian corvette moving slowly but deliberately closer. Its radar arrays rotated outward, locking on like an open declaration. "We are watching every move you make." Suddenly, it was no longer just drones. The possibility of ship-to-ship conflict had entered the equation. Commander Callahan leaned into his microphone. "All stations, Condition 1 alert. Weapons tight, phalanx systems hot." Across the Ross, mechanical hums filled the night as the ships close-in weapons systems, phalanx Gatling guns swiveled into position. Each fired 4,000 rounds per minute, designed to shred missiles or drones within seconds of impact. The gun crews felt the vibration of motors as barrels spun, waiting for permission to unleash. 4:34 a.m. The drone swarm split into two wings. Half streaked toward the F-35 above, attempting to box it in. The others descended even lower, their outlines vanishing into the sea spray. They were now just 12 nautical miles away, a distance a drone could cross in less than 4 minutes. The Ross's fire control officer turned toward the captain. "Sir, if we wait any longer, they'll be on top of us. Request permission to fire." But before the words were even processed, an urgent message arrived from NATO command: "Do not initiate. Repeat, do not initiate." For the men and women on deck, the command was incomprehensible. What did Brussels not see that they did? A wall of suicide drones closing at lethal speed, a Russian warship ready to pounce, and an F-35 already limping from an earlier strike. 4:37 a.m. Suddenly, one drone broke formation. It accelerated upward, engines screaming, as it raced directly for the damaged F-35. The pilot shouted into comms, pulling the Lightning II into a hard climb. Tracers erupted from the phalanx guns on the Ross. Streams of red fire tore into the night sky, ripping the drone apart in a blossom of metal shards. The roar echoed across the Baltic, breaking the fragile silence NATO had tried to preserve. The first shot had been fired not by intent, but by necessity. The swarm reacted instantly, drones banked hard, engines wailing as they changed course toward the Ross itself. Dozens of blips converged on a single target, a lone U.S. Navy destroyer holding the line for the Alliance. Commander Callahan gave the order, "Engage defensive fire authorized." And with that, the Baltic erupted. Vertical launch hatches slid open. Missiles roared into the sky, leaving columns of flame and smoke that lit the sea like daylight. SM-6 interceptors arced upward before diving into the swarm, their radar seekers locking with lethal precision. Explosions rippled across the horizon, fireballs splashing against black waves. But as fragments rained down, new signals appeared. More drones. A second wave. Russia had not sent 30, they had sent hundreds. The Ross was now at the center of an unfolding storm. If you were the captain, would you hold fire until the last possible second, or unleash everything to break the swarm? Comment below. 4:40 in the morning, the Baltic night was ripped open by stairways of flame as the first intercepts bloomed. The U.S. Navy destroyer USS Ross, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, rode the shock like a prizefighter, steel bones humming, while its Aegis combat system stitched a lethal lattice across the sky. Each Standard missile left a scorching pillar in its wake, leaping upward faster than thought, then folding back down to meet the onrushing drones. Where missile met target, the sea flashed white and orange, then fell dark again, as if the horizon were blinking. 4:42 in the morning. In the cockpit of the damaged F-35 Lightning II, the pilot's world narrowed to a trembling horizon line and a stubborn checklist. He pushed bleed air to balance the wounded wing. The jet responded like a bruised athlete hurting, but game. On his helmet visor, the sensor fusion built a ghostly map of dangers, heat signatures of engines, radar splinters from carbon fiber airframes, electronic noise smeared across frequencies. He jettisoned a decoy, then another, the aircraft's towed decoy system, singing its strange, invisible lullaby to any seeker that listened. Below, the Ross's phalanx gun breathed in short, controlled bursts, stitching silver rain into the dark. The war simulation you are watching is not a celebration. It is a study in decisions, seconds, and consequences. 4:44 in the morning, the swarm adapted. Half the drones, already flying just 30 feet above the water, cut speed to confuse the Ross's fire control solutions, then accelerated again, surging back up toward 550 miles per hour. The rest climbed in staggered tiers, trying to overwhelm the missile defense bubble from multiple angles. Russian operators were testing United States naval power the way a safecracker tests tumbler's gentle pressure, then sudden force. The destroyer's watch team responded with orchestral precision, SP-1 Delta radar sweeping, illuminators painting, vertical launch cells opening in a clean mechanical cadence. Every intercept was a line in an equation. Every missed intercept was a hole in the ship's future. 4:46 in the morning. A new contact appeared on the Ross's composite plot. A corvette to the north, its silhouette consistent with a Staragushki design, steering a line that would graze international waters without technically crossing. Its fire control radar woke, then went quiet, then woke again, as if winking a dare. On a secure circuit, a NATO E-3 airborne early warning aircraft relayed that additional drones were rising from trucks parked on a remote airstrip along the coast. That meant a second wave had already been loaded. The Ross's captain, Commander James Callahan, absorbed these facts with the calm of someone who has lived through storms. He spoke without raising his voice. Hold the center, we do not blink. Prioritize the vectors that threaten flight safety, then ship survival. 4:48 in the morning. A pair of NATO fighters, one Danish F-16, one Polish F-16 checked in at altitude, lances of light silhouetted against thin cloud. They asked for tasking and were given the outer ring. Slice the swarm's flanks, keep the pressure downrange, keep anything with a bigger warhead from ever sniffing the Ross. Their arrival did not change the Ross's math, but it altered the rhythm of the battle. Targets that a moment ago seemed to multiply now seemed to thin. That is naval power in practice, distributed, layered, never alone. 4:50 in the morning. The first near catastrophe arrived as a whisper. A drone, shielded by the wreckage of its fellows, rode the wave tops to within less than 1 nautical mile of the destroyer's starboard quarter. The ship's lookouts caught it first, a black comma sliding across foam. Right 2 o'clock, low. The phalanx spun, found, spoke. The drone disintegrated, but a glit remained, another behind it, then another. The Ross's electronic warfare team fired Nulka decoys, rocket-flung little ghosts that hang and hum with the electromagnetic signature of a ship. The nearest drone turned toward the decoy like a moth to a lamp and vanished in a shower of sparks. Everyone exhaled, and the captain said, mostly to himself, "Good, keep them guessing. Hidden strategy is not only what you do, it is what you make the other side believe you can do again." 4:52 in the morning. The wounded F-35 called it, fuel margin narrowing, hydraulic pressure stabilized but fragile. The pilot could limp to a NATO field if the air lanes were clean. The Ross cleared a corridor, with stacked intercepts, each one worth several $1 million, real budgets, real trade-offs, counted by real taxpayers. This is the weight of missile defense, every shot a moral and strategic choice. Above the destroyer, the jet passed through the safe lane like a pilgrim through a gauntlet, and every sailor on deck tracked it with their eyes until it slid into cloud and was gone. 4:54 in the morning. Then the sea betrayed a new shape, a handful of larger blips, not drones this time, and not missiles fast, attack craft, hugging the gray. Their speed was modest, their course unclean, like men stepping sideways down a hallway. Were they rescue vessels, or were they bait? The Ross held fire. The Danish F-16 dipped to investigate, banking hard, light scraping wing. The boats eased away as if embarrassed to be seen. Perhaps that was the point. Place civilian, looking metal near military metal, and dare the United States to choose wrong under pressure. If you were the commander, would you have fired a warning flare or said nothing and watched? 4:56 in the morning. From the north bank of cloud, the Polish F-16 Dove, loosed a guided munition at a cluster of drones, forming a second phalanx. The impact was clean, the effect immediate. It was not triumph, it was time bought. The Ross used those seconds to reset. New missile loads queued, phalanx barrels cooled and checked, damage control parties pre-positioned with hoses and foam even though no flame had yet kissed steel. Naval power includes boring virtues, discipline, drills, checklists that look unheroic until they fill a hole that was not there a minute before. 4:58 in the morning. 24 drones remained in the near ring. Some were smart enough to zig when the Ross zagged. Some were too dumb to do anything but charge. Intelligence is a texture in warfare, and tonight it was mixed, some targets guided with crisp human malice, others moved by autopilot alone. The destroyer met both as equals. An evolved Sea Sparrow missile snapped out from its canister, short-legged but fast, catching a climber just as it crested. An SM-2 reached farther, trading time for geometry, and met another in a bruise of light high right. Phalanx spoke last its voice, a chainsaw chewing apart the two that kept their faith in the sea surface all the way to the end. 5 in the morning, the plot calmed. Not quiet, never quiet, but calmed. The captain ordered a scan for secondary threats. That is when the radar picture acquired a strange scar. Far to the east, past the corvette and the airstrip, an arc of returns looked almost like weather but too regular to be weather. A technician muttered, "That is interference with a pulse," and another said, "Or a reflection that is not supposed to be there." A backroom algorithm flagged the pattern as consistent with a remote jammer riding a civilian broadcast tower. If true, someone had laid a hand on the region's sensory nervous system hours before the first collision. The first domino had been tipped in silence. 5:02 in the morning. The NATO E-3 confirmed unusual noise on multiple civilian bands. The corvette turned south and slowed, playing innocent. On the Ross, the captain authorized a narrow electromagnetic counterpunch, not a weapon, but a clearing of fog. Instantly the picture sharpened. Beneath the static, tiny fast movers sprinted toward a line of maritime traffic. The traffic included a flagged container ship, a research vessel, and a Baltic ferry beginning its morning route. That was the next stroke of the hidden strategy. Bend the battlefield through civilians. If drones mingled among ordinary ships, every intercept risked someone else's life. If the United States held fire, the destroyer ceded the initiative. That is how gray zone actors steal space without crossing a line they drew for themselves. 5:04 in the morning. The captain made the only choice that protected life and stability. He pushed the battle outward. He transmitted warnings in the clear to all civilian vessels in 4 languages, directed the NATO jets to herd the remaining drones away from traffic, and slid the Ross laterally to open sea, using his own hull as a shield between the swarm and the ferry. It was not dramatic. It was simply correct. On the ferry's bridge, a captain in a worn sweater listened to the U.S. Navy voice on his radio and changed course without argument. That is deterrence at work, quiet obedience to calm authority when it matters most. 5:06 in the morning. The second wave showed its face. More than 36 drones rising in a fan from the same coastal region, but with a difference. Their speed was lower. Their paths were not straight but curious, like dogs sniffing at a door. Electronic reconnaissance lit up. These were payload carriers with higher gain receivers, built to test defenses, soak up emissions, and maybe record every missile the Ross was willing to spend. The United States could swat them down and reveal its pattern, or it could play the longer game, feed them only what it chose, when it chose. Commander Callahan chose the longer game. He throttled back certain emitters, shaped others, and forced the enemy to guess. You do not show a thief the floor plan of your house while he is still on the porch. 5:08 in the morning. A last clutch of kamikaze drones lunged for the destroyer's wake. The Ross punched them away with a layered snap. One evolved Sea Sparrow missile, one phalanx burst, and a wink from a decoy that dragged a final attacker 100 yards wide. The sea accepted the wreckage with its usual indifference. Overhead, the Danish F-16 called Winchester weapons expended and climbed to tanker altitude. The Polish jet took the outer ring alone for a minute that felt like an hour. 5:10 in the morning. The horizon, at last, looked like a horizon. The corvette kept its distance, all innocence, The airstrip went dark again, all denial. The ferry reached a safer lane and sent a simple human signal. Thank you. The Ross's deck was wet with dew and the spray of its own defense. Below the waterline, engines kept their measured promise. Above decks, sailors flexed stiff fingers, reloaded what could be reloaded, and tried not to think about the cost of a morning measured in millions of dollars and ounces of courage. But the battle was not done. On a secondary screen, the intelligence officer froze a frame, an image from minutes before, when the first collision tumbled the F-35. In the upper left corner, hardly more than a smear, appeared a shape that did not match any drone in the catalog. It was too clean, too angular, and moved with the authority of higher thrust. It had been there before the collision, watching.
May 28th.
And 10 minutes after the skies calmed, that same shape, whatever it was, flashed once on the edge of radar and vanished behind a wall of engineered noise. It seemed resolved until just 10 minutes later, a mysterious signal appeared on radar. Not a drone, not a missile, something else. If you were in command, would you hold the line and treat this as a final provocation, or assume a wider hand is at work, adjust posture, and prepare for an escalation that could pull in an aircraft carrier, widen the theater, and transform Baltic sparks into Pacific tension? Do you agree the U.S. Navy's restraint tonight strengthened deterrence, or do you believe only decisive force can end a gray zone test before it grows? Comment your judgment below. 5:15 in the morning. The Baltic surface was deceptively calm, but inside the Ross's Combat Information Center, no one mistook calm for peace. The mysterious radar return a shadow too sharp to be weather, too deliberate to be coincidence lingered at the edge of every console. It had appeared, vanished, then reappeared in intervals, almost like a heartbeat. To some, it looked like the digital fingerprint of a stealth drone never cataloged by NATO. To others, it smelled of something far more dangerous. Foreign interference, maybe even a cyber ghost seeded into radar streams to blind a ship at its most vulnerable hour. Commander Callahan ordered the intelligence team to freeze frame every return, magnify every anomaly. They obeyed, but the picture only deepened the riddle. The angles were too clean for debris, too calculated for noise. What kind of hand was moving the pieces on this board? 5:17 in the morning. Above the sea, the surviving F-35 circled wide arcs, sensors open, hunting for the anomaly. Its pilot called in tones both urgent and calm. Contact intermittent, bearing 085, no visual. Possible stealth platform. A hush fell over the bridge. If the Russians had deployed an advanced drone cloaked in radar-absorbent material, the implications were enormous. It would mean the collision with the F-35 hours earlier had not been reckless but staged, a lure to keep American eyes locked forward while another player crept in from the flank. Could it be Russian? Perhaps. Yet its flight pattern was unfamiliar, even alien to their doctrine. The suspicion whispered through the Combat Information Center. What if this was not Russia alone? 5:19 in the morning. A message from Brussels crackled through, short and clipped. Maintain course. Do not pursue unconfirmed targets. Continue defensive posture. The words felt thin, inadequate to the enormity of the mystery. Was NATO leadership seeing the same signatures? Or were they deliberately underplaying the danger to keep escalation contained? On the Ross, Callahan faced the choice alone. He ordered the Aegis system into a hybrid mode, defensive weapons hot, but radars sweeping in long-range search, hoping to catch the anomaly at a distance where pattern could outweigh guesswork. 5:21 in the morning. Then the sea betrayed a second secret. Acoustic sensors picked up faint propeller cavitation, fast, light, and shallow. Subsurface drones, racing like wolves beneath the waves. Russia had tested these in the Black Sea, small torpedo-sized craft, guided by remote command, capable of striking hulls at close range. If combined with an aerial swarm, they could trap even an aircraft carrier in a kill box. For the Ross, already strained from the air assault, the prospect was chilling. Damage control parties were dispatched fore and aft. Sailors in fire-retardant gear crouched by watertight doors, hoses coiled like serpents, pumps humming in readiness. The Ross was not yet bleeding, but it braced as if it might at any second. 5:24 in the morning, the mysterious aerial signal pulsed again, closer this time. The F-35 pilot called visual on a faint silhouette, angular, twin-tailed, larger than any Russian drone cataloged to date. Its outline more closely resembled an experimental prototype seen once in leaked Chinese footage than any Russian design. That whisper spread across the Ross like wildfire. Could this be more than a bilateral clash? Could China have quietly inserted a pawn into the Baltic, cloaked beneath Russia's provocation? If true, the stakes multiplied. A clash in the Baltic might now ripple into Pacific tension, forcing the US Navy to think not just in terms of one sea, but two oceans, Baltic and Pacific, East and West, Europe and Asia linked by hidden hands. 5:26 in the morning. Commander Callahan faced the unthinkable. Do they expose the intruder publicly, risk sparking a triple-power confrontation, or keep it silent, analyzing in the shadows while outwardly treating it as Russian for diplomacy's sake? Every option carried weight. To announce China's presence would electrify headlines, rattle markets, and harden alliances overnight. To stay silent risked letting a rival test limits with impunity. He made his call. Document everything. Silent treatment. No broadcast until confirmed. We will not be the first to cry wolf. 5:28 in the morning. The Ross launched a Scan Eagle drone. Small, high endurance, meant for silent eyes. It climbed into the thin dawn, its cameras searching. The crew crowded monitors as it swept the sector. At first, only haze. Then, a shape, sharp angles, twin tails, heat exhaust, barely visible. The feed froze for one agonizing second as the uplink wavered, then returned. The silhouette was gone, vanished. Some whispered it had submerged into cloud. Others swore it had jammed the uplink deliberately, as if aware it was being watched. 5:30 in the morning. The sea boiled alive. From the Russian coastline, a fresh wave of drones, 50 this time, rose in tight formation. Unlike the first wave, these carried heavier payloads. Their speed was slower, 400 miles per hour, but their coordination was chilling. They flew not as individuals, but as if tethered by a single guiding mind. Electronic warfare screens lit with static. Someone, somewhere, was orchestrating them with precision beyond the ordinary. The Ross's deck erupted into activity. SM-6 missiles shrieked into the air, carving luminous trails. The Phalanx gunners tightened grips on triggers slick with sweat. The evolved Sea Sparrow missiles clawed into the swarm. The sky split into fiery blossoms, each drone's destruction punctuated by concussive thuds echoing across steel. But for every drone destroyed, another closed the gap. Within minutes, a dozen slipped through the missile net, diving low toward the ship's flanks. 5:34 in the morning. The Ross endured its first strike. One drone, clipped but not destroyed, slammed into the aft railing. The explosion was small but violent. Fire erupted on the helo deck. Alarms screamed across compartments. Fire, fire, fire! Damage control teams sprinted, foam cannons hissing, boots slipping on burning fuel. The Ross shuddered but held steady, turbines roaring with defiance. Above, the F-35 dove low, its cannon roaring, slicing a drone apart just yards from the destroyer's superstructure. Sparks showered across steel. Cheers erupted for a second, quick, fierce, and gone. For the battle was still raging. 5:37 in the morning. NATO command in Brussels sent a terse update. Document escalation. Do not expand engagement. Political channels in motion. For the men and women on the Ross, those words meant nothing against the pounding reality of steel and fire. Strategy was a chessboard in Brussels. Here, it was heat, noise, and seconds. 5:40 in the morning. The Ross's radars sharpened once more. And there it was, the anomaly again. Angular, deliberate, hovering at the edge of detection, watching as the US Navy fought for survival. Some swore it broadcasted, its electronic whisper weaving interference into the very fabric of the battle. And then, as if to prove it was no phantom, it dove briefly into the swarm, its signature blending, then vanishing again. The crew understood. Someone else was learning from this fight. Someone else was harvesting NATO's tactics, its rhythm of fire, its cadence of restraint. Was this Russia's hand alone, or was China, quietly, invisibly, already present? 5:42 in the morning. The swarm thinned, shredded by layers of intercepts, but the Ross bore scars, smoke trailing from the aft deck, sailors bandaging burns, the smell of scorched metal thick in the air. And still, the shadow remained, pulsing on the edge of every screen, daring someone to acknowledge it. The destroyer had held, but at what cost, and against whom, truly? Do you think this hidden hand in the Baltic was Russian deception, or a Chinese probe disguised in Russia's shadow? And if you were the commander, would you reveal it to the world or keep silent and study the intruder in secret? 5:45 in the morning. The Baltic had quieted into smoke and silence, but silence was a lie. Beneath the ash of drones and the hiss of seawater cooling steel, a darker layer of the battle was only just beginning. The Ross's consoles began to flicker, first a single screen, then three, then entire panels across Combat Information Center. Data feeds looped back on themselves, showing phantom targets, warheads that did not exist, and ships that were not there. For a heartbeat, even the radar showed the Ross firing on itself. Commander Callahan froze. This was no mechanical fault. This was intrusion. A cyber hand had reached inside the Aegis combat system, probing, rewriting, bending reality inside the very brain of the ship. 5:47 in the morning. The interference expanded, not like random jamming, but like an infection spreading deliberately. Someone knew exactly where to strike. The data bus that tied radar, missiles, and fire control into one nervous system. Engineers scrambled below decks, physically severing connections, forcing the Ross back into partial manual mode. It was slower, clumsier, but safe. Still, the question burned: who had the keys? Then a new transmission arrived. Not from NATO, not from Russia, but from somewhere in the Pacific. Embedded in the intrusion code was a signature string that analysts had seen before, buried inside Chinese test networks along the South China Sea. It was subtle, almost mocking. Whoever had unleashed this attack wanted the United States to know: you are not fighting one adversary tonight, you are being studied by two. 5:49 in the morning. Above, the stealth silhouette reappeared at the edge of dawn, sharper now against pale clouds. Its angular frame hovered at the boundary of radar and optical sighting, almost taunting. The F-35 pilot locked his sensors on it, but the image dissolved into static before he could transmit. Was it cloaking, or was it hacking his feed in real time? Either way, it was confirmation. China's shadow was not hypothetical. It was here, in the Baltic, watching. The implications were staggering. The strike on the F-35, the swarm of Russian drones, the probing of missile defenses, it was all part of a greater orchestration. Russia provided the noise, the spectacle. But China, quietly, invisibly, had reached into the circuitry, harvesting every reaction, every missile launch, every defensive tactic of the US Navy. 5:50 in the morning. The Ross had survived fire, steel, and smoke, but now faced an invisible war that could not be fought with missiles. Engineers tore cables from racks, resetting systems to analog backups. Damage control parties became cyber control teams, armed not with foam and hoses, but with cutters and bypass lines. The destroyer was fighting for its mind, not just its hull. Callahan stood silent at the center, weighing what he now knew. If he reported Chinese involvement without absolute proof, NATO's unity could fracture. If he remained silent, China would know it had tested America and walked away unseen. And then the strangest signal of all. The Phantom craft stopped transmitting interference. It turned, banked slowly, and retreated east. Not fleeing, not defeated, but finished. It had gathered what it came for. The Ross's radar cleared. The systems rebooted, but the unease deepened. For the first time, US Navy sailors whispered not of Russian provocation alone, but of something larger. An alliance of shadows where one adversary struck with drones, and another struck through code. If tonight was rehearsal, what would the premiere look like? If you were in Commander Callahan's place, would you reveal the hidden hand to NATO allies and risk global escalation, or keep it classified, and hope silence buys time? 5:55 in the morning. The Baltic was quiet again, though the quiet was uneasy. Wreckage floated in thin oil slicks, the dawn wind carrying the bitter scent of burned metal. The Ross's sailors stood watch, their eyes heavy, their uniforms stained with foam and smoke. They had survived a storm, but survival was not victory. It was warning. The official report would say a Russian drone struck a US F-35 Lightning II, that swarms had tested missile defenses, that NATO ships responded with proportional force. But every officer aboard the Ross knew the deeper truth. This was no isolated clash. It was a live-fire classroom, a war simulation staged for hidden observers. And somewhere far to the east, those observers were already studying what they had learned. The cost of restraint. The US Navy fired only when forced, honoring NATO's rule of self-defense. That restraint preserved legitimacy, but it also revealed reaction times, firing thresholds, and tactical doctrine. Restraint is not weakness, but it comes with a cost. Your rhythm becomes predictable to those who watch closely. The age of hybrid attack, drones above, drones below, code within. War is no longer a single domain. The Ross fought not only with steel and fire, but with keyboards and circuit breakers. The battle proved that a destroyer's greatest wound may not come from a missile strike, but from a corrupted radar feed. The shadow of multiplicity. Russia may have launched the swarm, but signs pointed to China watching, probing, and harvesting. One adversary distracts, another learns. This is the essence of 21st century conflict: layered, deniable, plausibly deniable. The battlefield was the Baltic Sea, but the message was global. Your Pacific tension is connected to your European frontier. For viewers who ask, what does this mean for me? Understand this. Technology alone is not invincible. The F-35 Lightning II is the most advanced fighter on Earth, yet a simple drone strike disabled it. Complexity can be fragile. Defense is layered. The Ross survived, not because of one system, but because of many missiles, close-in guns, decoys, electronic countermeasures, and above all, human discipline. Every sailor's drill, every checklist, every practice second mattered. Cyber defense is frontline defense. The greatest threat of the night was not steel, but silence consoles that showed ghosts, systems that bent reality. War in the digital domain is as decisive as war on the ocean's surface. History educates. Just as naval theorists once studied Trafalgar or Midway, so too will future officers study the Baltic drone clash for lessons. This is why simulations matter, to think before real blood is ever shed. If you were the commander, what would you have chosen? Reveal the hidden hand and risk escalation, or keep silent and risk being studied again? If you were the pilot, would you have stayed to guard the Ross, or diverted to base when hydraulics first failed? If you were a NATO strategist, would you tighten the rules of engagement or loosen them to deter the next provocation? Every choice reveals a philosophy of power. Every hesitation or strike writes the future. The US Navy held the line in the Baltic not to spark war, but to prevent it. Its sailors endured fire and code so that borders did not break, so that escalation did not spread. America remains not only a military superpower, but the maintainer of global order, because order requires sacrifice, vigilance, and strength. One moment of weakness can lead to a decade of chaos. One act of discipline can prevent it. That is the lesson of the Baltic Night. History is unfolding before our eyes, and it is no longer fought only with steel, but with silence, code, and shadows. If you believe strength deters chaos, subscribe now. If you think otherwise, tell us why. Your judgment matters, because tomorrow's doctrine is shaped by the debates we have today.